After the worst loss, perhaps in program history, where do you stand on Ryan Day? Let me know in the comments section below. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and again, comment your thoughts on Ryan Day down in the comment section below. And please click the little notification bell so that you can get notified when I release more college football content, whether it's about Ohio State and Ryan Day or someone else. He has a 66-10 career record, 46-5 in Big Ten Conference play. 4 of those losses are to Michigan. The other one is to the Oregon Ducks. 4 teams, 21, 22, 23 Michigan, and 24 Oregon, that will finish top 5 in FPI and that were close to legitimate national title contenders, outright national title contenders, or in the case of the 2023 Michigan team, a legitimate national champion, like a total national title 15-0 team. The other loss, the 5th, is to the worst Michigan team since the COVID year. If you don't want to count the COVID year, it's the worst Michigan team since Brady Hoke went 5-7 and started a quarterback with a concussion because, well, he was just stupid and that dumb. So no insult to Brady Hoke as a person there. It's just as the coach, as the figure of Hoke. Really dumb, stupid decision, and just a culmination of asinine decisions in 2014. Horrible year. Day is 1-4 against Michigan. He is 2-6 versus FPI top 5 teams. By the way, this is something that is horrific if you're an Ohio State fan or even a Big Ten defender like myself. Ohio State's the only top 5 team in FPI in the Big Ten. The only one. The others are Texas, and I believe Alabama and Georgia. Yes, and then Notre Dame's at 2. I know Notre Dame at 2 in FPI. I don't know if I don't know if I agree with that. In fact, I don't agree with it, but I digress. I think that Oregon will jump into the top 5 for sure. I think Penn State could, depending on what happens this weekend and in the playoff. Indiana probably not. But again, you never know. The season's been totally chaotic. Everyone in the top 10 of FPI is pretty close to each other. It's the same thing with the top 10 in ESPN's efficiency. But he's 2-6 against FPI top 5 teams, which for now extends from 2019 to 2023. His only wins were against 2020 Clemson, number 3 in FPI that year, and Penn State last year, number 5 in FPI. You look at AP top 5 teams. At the top, Ryan Day played him. He is 4-7 against AP top 5 teams. He's 2-1 this year, by the way. So half of his AP top 5 wins have come in this season. But again, a lot of those teams are down compared to the other top 5 teams he's faced in terms of power ratings. Like, this year's Indiana team is not as good as last year's Michigan team, or the prior Michigan team, or maybe even the Michigan team before that in 2021. This Penn State team is not as good as Michigan last year or the year prior. It goes the same with Oregon, I think, and Oregon beat Ohio State this year. So he has won all of the little games except for the one last Saturday, and last Saturday wasn't a little game. In the grand scheme of things, in terms of just treating every football game the same, absolutely it was a little game. In relationship to Ohio State and the Big Ten, that was a big game, even though Michigan's record was 6-5. And yeah, they flunked. That was Ryan Day's worst loss of his career. And 66-10, 46-5, I mean, that's a big reason why you shouldn't want him to be fired. But what I will say before we get to that conversation is that changes must be made no matter what. They win it all this year, they got to make changes, because if they win it all, it's going to be because they're on the side of luck. It's going to be because God loves Ohio State, not because Ohio State's doing something on its own merit and the divine is just content with what's happening. If that even makes sense. And I don't even know if that's like sound philosophically, but this is a college football channel. The point that I'm trying to make is a lot of things would have to go OSU's way for them to win it all this year. So even if they do, they need to change things. They have to change things this year. Ohio State does. And that's major staff shakeup. Maybe it's Ryan Day and everyone getting fired. Maybe you encourage players to go to the portal, but I think it's more than that. I think you got to encourage some players to go to the portal. But more importantly, because a lot of these players that Ohio State recruits and gets in are talented, what you must do is you got to get better developers of talent. It's like, I don't get why Ohio State fired Perry Alano this preseason. I know he wasn't recruiting well, but Ohio State's issues have never, ever, ever been recruiting. Never. It's been developmental, and that guy's one of the best in the business at developing. Example again, I'm a Michigan fan. I would love it if we hired a Perry Alino, whether as a high-paid analyst or as our next DB coach if we don't keep Lamar Morgan. He's incredible. He developed Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant at Cincinnati. And the reason OSU's safeties this year are so good is because of his coaching. It's the same thing as last year. I feel like Ohio State's priorities are not in the right position at all. Some of them absolutely are. That's why they haven't imploded, by the way. Like 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. We're 6 years in. The program hasn't collapsed at all. Like, there are some areas that are shaky, absolutely. But it's not like Day is this terrible, terrible coach. If he were, Ohio State would have probably gone like 8-4 with this schedule, or maybe 7-5 or some other things. He has some good staffers. He has an elite staffer in Brian Hartline. I think Carlos Lachlan is good. I mean, he's not the reason the rushing offense is horrible. Look up front with Justin Fry. Tim Walton thinks a great corner coach. James Laurinaitis is doing a wonderful job with the linebackers. But the recipe is incomplete, and as a result, when you bake your cake, when you make that tasty chicken meal in your pressure cooker, when you open up the oven or the pressure cooker, it stinks. Or at least maybe it doesn't stink, but you think, where's the seasoning? Where's the kick? Where's the juiciness to it? And it just kind of lacks. Changes are necessary. Deep changes are necessary. I think, this is just my opinion, my analysis, I don't think you should fire Day right now. I don't. Because when I think of it here, Dan Lanning not going anywhere. He's at Oregon forever. You may want to hire Curt Cignetti. And if Ohio State does that this year, I will praise them for it. I think that Curt Cignetti at a program like OSU would build not something Saban-esque, but certainly close with OSU's talent and where they are. I think Cignetti right now is a top 10, top 5 head coach. And I've thought that way for a few weeks now. And the OSU game didn't change much of that. It certainly made it clear to me that I overvalued Indiana as a team. It didn't change my opinion on Cignetti at all as a head coach. I mean, he's faced several teams this year that have inferior talent to him, worked basically all of them. Again, outside of OSU, who has superior talent. He's faced several teams with superior talent, and all of them except for OSU he has worked in a variety of ways. What I think has to happen is OSU is to get a new offensive coordinator. They have to get a new offensive line coach, new D-line coach. They have to get a special teams coordinator, whether that's an analyst who, because of the new rules, is really the special teams coordinator but labeled as an analyst, or you actually get in name a special teams coach. Just do it. Do it. Because the special teams hasn't been good. Like the Caleb Downs punt return for a touchdown was more so because Indiana's special teams sucked in that game rather than Ohio State's being good. And also because Caleb Downs is an epic player who will go down in both Alabama and Buckeye history as being a phenomenal alien. Future NFL first rounder. And he's only a sophomore. And new strength and conditioning. Mickey Marotti, he needs to get out of there. These Urban Meyer holdovers are holding Ryan Day back, ironically enough. The day when Ryan Day, if ever, stops trying to LARP as Urban Meyer or Woody Hayes will be the day that he effectively wins Ohio State the national title, whether on the year of that day or in the future. That's when all of this crap ends, is when he stops trying to LARP as something that he's not. He's not Urban Meyer. He's not Woody Hayes. But I think it's very evident that the record and some of the things he's done He's not John Cooper either. Maybe in the aspect of against Michigan he is, but he's not losing 4 games or 3 games or, again, outside of Michigan, which rivalry game. There's just, I'm not defending him. I'm not, because I'm not going to say he's this elite coach right now. I'm going to wait on that until I see what's in the playoff. I'm taking that back. I do think his seat should be warm. There needs to be more pressure applied. But, I mean, come on. Come on. He needs to carve out a niche for himself, and he needs to form an identity. Because the frightening thing about Saturday is, you know who Ryan Day and Chip Kelly looked like? They looked like Frosty the Snowman. If you don't know who Frosty the Snowman is, that is my sarcastic and affectionate nickname for Scott Frost. The guy who doused Nebraska in, don't even know if I should be saying this, but he doused Nebraska in alcohol and lit it on fire. That is what Ohio State's offensive coaching looked like. It looked like Scott Frost, where you don't utilize your athletes, implicitly encouraging them to transfer away, and you try to run a stupid spread option with no offensive line. Ridiculous. That right there is Ryan Day either passively or actively trying to be Urban Meyer, trying to be Chip Kelly, trying to be smarter and tougher than everyone else, and it's not working. It's not. And it's Day's fault because he's the CEO, but it's not like this all falls on him individually. Like, from a CEO perspective, yeah, that he's not involved in the offense all that much. He isn't. He delegated responsibilities to Kelly. His O-line coach is awful. Can't recruit, can't develop. I mean, it's no coincidence that Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin are transfers, and Kelly's scheme probably helped them look really, really good. And Simmons' issue was penalties more so than skill play when he came in. And then on the defensive line, Larry Johnson, he's been good. He's a legend in his own right. But, I mean, Saban, toward the end of his dynasty, teams were worse. D'Antonio nearly ruined MSU because he was stubborn and wouldn't retire. I mean, at some point, your legends are no longer legends. They are no longer the best. It's time to move on from Larry Johnson. When Jim Knowles sent the house against Michigan a few times, they didn't get any pressure on Davis freaking Warren, on Evan Link, who can't pass block. This Ohio State defensive front did a worse job at getting pressure on Davis Warren than the 2022 defensive front did against Olu Oluwatimi and an elite offensive line and getting pressure on J.J. McCarthy. That was embarrassing. That was terrible. There's just, there needs to be change. Wholesale changes. Whether that is Day being fired, which you may agree with, and I'm not going to argue with that right now. I just think logistically it doesn't make sense. Symbolically, it does. You can't lose to Michigan 4 years in a row. It's why Harbaugh should have been fired at Michigan when he lost to the Buckeyes 4 or 5 years in a row. Symbolically, it makes sense. Logistically, however, I don't think it does. And you don't want Vrabel. And Vrabel probably doesn't want to come back because he's an NFL guy. Not because he doesn't like OSU. He obviously likes OSU. Marcus Freeman. You don't want Marcus Freeman. Do you want to beat Michigan, but then lose to Purdue, and then on top of losing to Purdue, get outcoached in a big game that's maybe not Michigan, or lose to Michigan on and off? You don't want that. You don't know how good Freeman is as a coach. I think he's good, but good isn't good enough for you. Good gets you fired at Ohio State. It gets you kicked to the curb. You need elite. You need top 5. And I'm not confident enough to say that Freeman is there, even though I really like what he's done at Notre Dame. I mean, talk about a team that actually wanted to be like Michigan and succeeded. That's Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame right now. They are 2021 Michigan. If 2021 Michigan lost to Rutgers at home, which they nearly did, but beat everyone else. That's what Notre Dame is right now, with that defense and also with that offensive line and rushing attack, which is incredible. But changes have to be made. Strength and conditioning, special teams, the trenches on the O-line, D-line, and a new offensive coordinator. Get someone new, get someone creative. The spread option is dead, at least the one that you want to run. It's dead. It's gone. It's evolved into something new. It shed its skin, and it's become the pro spread, or a pro spread with an option element. run the modern game. Urban Meyer was a pioneer of the spread, and he adapted when he could. I mean, think about Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. The best coaches don't try to play in a box. It's what held Harbaugh back for years. It's what holds James Franklin back right now. The best coaches adapt to what they have. And Urban Meyer would tell you that with a straight face and would be very mad at you if you disagreed. So, speaking of all of that, let's circle back to the present, to the here and now, and for the next few months. With Ryan Day and with what we have on staff, and also the players too, think about it, is there hope in the CFP? Is there a chance Ohio State wins it all? And I ask that because if Ohio State wins it all, there should be no calls for him to be fired. If he wins it all, I will say the loss to Michigan is humiliating, but I will also say at the same time the seat's totally cold. You win a national title, you should never be fired. I mean, if he even reaches the national title game, I would question whether or not he should be fired. Reach the Final Four? But again, it doesn't logistically make sense in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Let me know. Tell me in the comment section below what you think. I think there's hope. I think that Ohio State's better than the majority of the teams who will make it in the playoff. I think they're better than Tennessee. They're better than Alabama. They're better than South Carolina. They're better than Miami. They're better than anyone in the ACC, even though SMU's ranked ahead of them for some reason in the coaches poll. They're better than a lot of teams in the SEC. I think the only teams right now that are definitively better than OSU by a slim but obvious margin or by a wide margin are Oregon, Texas, and Penn State. That's it. And yes, you beat Penn State, but Ohio State's gotten progressively worse as the season's gone on, and that McLaughlin injury made it so that you can't run up the middle anymore. You could occasionally, even without Simmons. You can't anymore without McLaughlin. That's been very, very apparent. And I also think because of the limitations there, Howard's gotten worse because it's obvious that Ohio State's only success is going to be passing the football. So it's easier for defenses to guard against your offense. And Penn State's D-line would manhandle that offensive line right now. Same thing with Texas with Alfred Collins and Oregon too with Derek Harmon. But that's really it. I still think you're better than Indiana. I mean, heck, this exact team crushed Indiana. And yeah, Indiana made some flukish plays, but on a different day, at best for IU, it's maybe 27-20 Ohio State, maybe 24-21 or 24-20, 24-17 on a neutral field. I mean, Ohio State's still a really good, great, maybe near elite team. The reason there's frustration, and the frustration's deserved, is because Ohio State's not beating their biggest rival. They just lost in a very humiliating fashion, and they're not elite. And because of that loss that was very humiliating, James Franklin is going to Indy, and Ryan Day is not. And now James Franklin and Ryan Day kind of look like the same guy, except Day can recruit better and has a better program, so therefore he is better. Not saying they're the same guy, by the way. I think Day's a way better game manager than Franklin, but that's more so anecdotal and of personal opinion than anything else at this point. The O-line issues is what holds OSU back. If OSU can find a way to be creative in the run game, like using pole blocking techniques, which worked briefly against Michigan, or if they can find a way to be very involved in the passing attack and be tactical so that nothing gets repetitive, and the defense continues to play this way and is healthy, they can win it all. But that's asking a lot, especially from the offensive line and from an offense that is, at this point, way more predictable than it was early in the year. Another thing to keep in mind is that OSU has played a tough schedule, and therefore they've gotten worn down. They've gotten battered up. They've played more snaps. The starters have, at least. They're not as well rested as Oregon is or as Penn State. This also comes into conversation because OSU kind of had an early second bye. Oregon was coming off of their bye yesterday against Washington. So they're not as well rested as many other teams in the playoff, and they have some of the worst trench play in the playoff. Like Texas, Oregon, Penn State have both better O-lines, and Texas and Penn State, I think, have better D-lines than OSU does. Derek Harmon is a better defensive lineman than anyone OSU has, in my opinion. I think that a team like Georgia, when healthy, is better in the trenches than OSU is. And there are probably some other teams that I may be forgetting, like South Carolina. South Carolina has a better defensive line. Tennessee has a better rushing attack, better offensive line right now. The SMU, it's so hard to compare those teams because the completely different schedules and different level of talent. But SMU's fundamentally sound, good in the trenches. So, I mean, I'll probably make another video on this, talking about this, because Ohio State's not playing for a conference championship, so therefore I have time to talk about them in a sense of how can they do in the playoffs. But the O-line issues are a huge hurdle to overcome, and really the conclusion of all of this is just they need to figure it out. And the time is now. And the time is right after their playoff run, whether they exit in the first round, whether they go 2-1, or whether they win it all, right after their playoff run ends. They need to figure it out sometime in between now and then. And preferably Ryan Day should do some figuring out now in pencil, where you look at the staffers who want to fire, the ones who want to get in contact with, and figure it out, because this is not acceptable. This is not good. And because of that loss to Michigan yesterday, it changed a lot. I thought Ohio State was going to be a lock to win the conference next year, even though they were losing a ton because of their talent, because their coaches. They weren't going to play Oregon. Oregon was losing a lot, and I think losing a lot at more important positions relative to Oregon's roster and how they're built. This loss changed everything, because it's abundantly clear Ryan Day can't beat Michigan. And even if Sharon Moore's not the guy at Michigan, Michigan will probably be better next year than they are this year, and they have home field advantage. And Penn State returns a lot of key players next year too. And Ryan Day plays Texas in week 1 next year, and Sark has that program on the rise. So a lot has changed, even if it doesn't feel like it. And Ohio State fans do have a right to freak out. So, yeah, Ryan Day and Ohio State need to figure it out.